P9 is back with another vlog, and I am here in the one of the most historical towns in America. And guys, when I tell you, this whole place is like this whole town is like a battlefield, a major battlefield during the most important wars in history, Civil War. Hey, I'm not kidding. Check this out. Cannons, sculptures, statues of Confederate soldiers, all of that. You're gonna get all of that here in this vlog, right here in Chickamauga. Let's get it. Good afternoon, good people. This your boy P9. I'm back with another vlog after a months-long hiatus where I was doing revamps of my big city vlogs. So I promise you guys, this is new, up-to-date content. This is June 2026. I'm here in Chickamauga, Georgia. Again, one of the most historical towns in the Deep South. Chickamauga is a city that's entrenched in Civil War history. It was the site of the Battle of Chickamauga. Currently, it's in the county of Walker County here in North Georgia, not too far from Chattanooga, outside the Chickamauga Public Library right here. And right across the street is the Gordon Lee Memorial High School, home of the Trojans, the Gordon Lee Trojans. So that is Chickamauga's local high school. Really nice building. I wanted to get this marker right here. This is a marker that commemorates Cavalry Corps Brigadier General Robert B. Mitchell, who served between September 17th to September 22nd of 1863 in the midst of the Civil War. This is the 1st and 2nd Division of the Cavalry Corps. Colonel Edward M. McCrook and Brigadier General George Crook. It's just some history of the Corps when they arrived in McLemore's Cove from the rear of Lafayette in the vicinity of Somerville and Alpine via Lookout Mountain and Doherty's Gap. And this was all, again, between September 17th and September 22nd. So this is when that whole corps and that brigade came into the Chattanooga Valley to engage in battle. Of course, Chickamauga, major battle site. So you're going to see a ton of markers and sculptures and things like that that commemorates that major battle during the Civil War. So Chickamauga, let's see, Chickamauga population wise, it's a little less than 3,000 residents. But Chickamauga being as historically significant as this town is, especially for the history buffs out there, this place draws a lot of history buffs. So of course, a lot of people come and visit. 234 Cove, established 1932. Okay, 1932. So we're talking almost 100 years strong. Shout out to them. Go ahead and cross over here. Again, that's Gordon Lee Memorial High School over there. And it sits right next to Gordon Lee Mansion, built in 1847. We'll get a little close up there soon. Another marker talks about Major General Joseph Wheeler. So that was another division of the Army. Now, again, the Battle of Chickamauga was fought between the U.S. Army or the Union Army and Confederate forces. So it was one of the many major battles and campaigns of the Civil War. You have this sculpture right here. Let me see who this is. See if they have any information on who this particular individual is. I guess at one point in time, this was a Gordon plantation. Back in 1861, James Clark Gordon, William Gordon, Blackstone Hendricks, and Jerome Henderson organized and trained a company of state militia on these grounds to defend the state of Georgia, as ordered by the Georgia Governor Joe Brown. In an effort to defend the South, the company traveled to Knoxville, Tennessee, and was mustered into 1st Company, 26th Tennessee Confederate Infantry Regiment on July 8, 1861. And there was a capture at Fort Donelson, Tennessee, and then a shipment to those prisoners to Camp Douglas in federal prison camp in Illinois. So apparently this sculpture right here is in memory of Orderly Sergeant Jerome Bonaparte Henderson, who died on March 4th, 1862 at Camp Douglas and is buried in Confederate mound at Oakwood Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois, along with 6,000 other fellow Confederate soldiers. So this is indeed a Confederate statue right here, statue of a Confederate soldier. And the Sons of Confederate Veterans. This was erected in the year of our Lord, 2016, by the Private John Ingram Camp, 1977, son of Confederate veterans, right here in Chickamauga. So this was erected by one of the, I guess, descendants of the Confederate veterans. And this is also in memory of Charles H. Rourke, Private John Ingram, Camp Commander, 2012 to 2016. And the Sons and Confederate Veterans and the Georgia War Commission, Civil War Commission, were ones who contributed funding. And I have to get this scripture right here. Greater love hath no man than that a man lay down his life for his friends. That's in John 15:13. So I like how they sculpted that scripture in there. And here's just a bunch of, I'm guessing a bunch of soldiers, citizen soldiers. So there were also a bunch of citizen soldiers, their names listed right here, who came together to help defend Georgia. And here's historic Chickamauga, Georgia. There were humans living in what is now Walker County as early as around 10,000 BC. For thousands of years, people subsisted through hunting and gathering of wild plant foods. So particularly the Cherokees. The Cherokees and the Yuki people, as you can see, Cherokees use this land as hunting grounds. And they also cleared land in the fork made by the spring stream at the Chickamauga Creek. And here's some images of earthen burial mound covered by trees. And this is a stone wall that was built by early native Indians in Walker County. And, you know, so there were a bunch of farmland and things like that where the Muskogee tribe and the Cherokees resided and they built their civilization. So we're talking thousands of years BC. Around 900 AD, a bunch of the Europeans and basically four groups of Muskogee speaking peoples left this area and began moving slowly toward the east. Around 900 AD, they reached Georgia and began building large platform mounds similar to those pyramids of Mexico. For much of the next 600 years, the local area was part of the major Muskogee complex known as the Paramount Chiefdom. And there was a subgroup of Muskogees called the Coasades. So you had the Yukis and the Coasades. And, you had but the dominant culture, the dominant natives were the Cherokees. And for a short period of time, from 1776 to 1838, the dominant native people in the local area were Cherokees. So that was like around the mid 19th century. Remember, the Indian Removal Act had a lot of Cherokees forcibly removed from the area and moved westward to what's currently the Indian Territory of Oklahoma and Kansas, Nebraska, and all of that. And yeah, after the Cherokees were removed, the courthouse was used for the first county seat of Walker County. According to Sartain, the first court of Walker County was held in this building. And Judge Hooper was the presiding judge. And a man named Hogg Smith was tried and convicted of murdering 2 Indians. He was hanged on gallows erected on the north side of the hill above the spring. And this was the first legal hanging to occur in the county. Interesting information right there. But that was back in when Chickamauga was the seat of Walker County. Today, currently, the county seat is in Lafayette, Georgia, a town that I visited a couple of times before and vlogged in. Actually, the last time I was in Lafayette during the Honeybee Festival, I actually met a young man who was from Chickamauga. He subscribed to my channel. I thought that was pretty cool. Shouts out to him. But yeah, just some of those cannons that they use during battle. Mounted right here in very strategic locations. Like many cities and towns that were entrenched in the Civil War or any other war for that matter, there were hospitals that had to be built in order to treat wounded soldiers and soldiers who also got sick. So you had the hospitals, the right-wing Union Army, Surgeon Glover Perrin, USA Medical Director, Army of the Cumberland, Assistant Surgeon Dallas Bash, Assistant Medical Director, Army of the Cumberland, and Surgeon F.H. Gross of the U.S. Volunteers, Surgeon Jabez Perkins of the 10th Kentucky Volunteers, and Surgeon A.J. Phelps of the U.S. Volunteers. So the main hospital depot for the wounded for the Union Army was located in this vicinity during the Battle of September 19th and 20th. In the hospitals of the 1st and 3rd Divisions, 20th Corps, and 2nd and 4th Divisions, 14th Corps were established near this point, utilizing a large brick building and several outbuildings supplemented by tents. The hospitals of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Divisions of the 21st Corps were established near here on the Dry Valley Road on the 19th. And by 8 o'clock on the evening on the 19th, every place of shelter was filled. So, yes, you had hospitals that were being established. Again, a lot of soldiers got wounded and sick. So there had to be surgeons and hospitals on deck to care for them. And this is the field headquarters, Army of the Cumberland. You had Major General William S. Rosecrans of the Army of the Cumberland. And you had different 14th and 20th and 21st Army Corps and who they were led by. The Cavalry and Reserve Corps, who they were led by. So, you know, this is where General Rosecrans reached and General Thomas's headquarters at Stevens Gap from Chattanooga at night. So Chattanooga is not far from Chickamauga. Very, very close, probably less than an hour's drive. But you know, from at least in the modern day, of course, back then it was longer. But you know, yeah. But this is the field headquarters, Army of the Cumberland. Over here on the grounds of Gordon Lee Mansion, built in 1847 by slave labor. Bricks were made right here on the site. And let's call it what it is, a plantation house. Slave quarters over there on the left. So you can actually come to Chickamauga and take a walk. They have a walking path and they have historical markers nearby, as you can see. And here's a marker of one of Chickamauga's Black Confederate soldiers, Clark Lee. That's an image of him right here by artist Ken Pennington. Shout out to Ken Pennington for this image. But Clark was born to a 15-year-old enslaved African woman named Emmeline in January 1848. He was born and grew up in one of the 6 two-room brick slave houses on the Gordon Plantation in what is now the town of Chickamauga. James Gordon came to this area shortly after Cherokee removal. And shortly after removal, he built this magnificent house that is still here today. James Gordon had a son named James Clark Gordon, and Clark Lee was probably named for the master's son and may have grown up as the companion of a personal slave or older white boy. So here's some image of Andrew and Silas Chandler, and married to Gordon's daughter and later inherited the slaves. So a lot of slaves were passed down too. You know what I'm saying? They were born in captivity and passed down to future slave owners. As you can see, Lee fought at the Chickamauga battle. There goes Clark Lee again. He fought at the Chickamauga on September 19th, 20th, and in 1863 at the Missionary Ridge, November 23rd to 25th, and the Atlanta Campaign, September of 1864, Peachtree Creek in 1864, and Jonesboro. So he fought in multiple campaigns of the Civil War. So, wow, that's very interesting. Very interesting. And he lived for more than 40 years in Chattanooga. In his old age, he applied for and received a well-deserved Confederate military pension from the state of Tennessee, and enabling him to spend his final years in retirement. So, very cool information pertaining to Mr. Clark Lee. And there's a burial area as well. So shout out to Clark Lee. And there goes Colonel James Clark Gordon right there. And this is where he lived, in an old Cherokee log house located in what was called the Fork Field. There goes James Lee right there in an early view of the mansion. So James Gordon, health failed and he died in the winter of 1863. And Elizabeth Lee brought her children back to be with her mother. But see, here they lived right here on this ground, the Gordon Lee Mansion. And the Gordon house's mother and grandmother during the battle, his constant cheerful nature made him a favorite with the Federal soldiers here. And in his adult life, Gordon Lee liked to tell about his participation in the battle. I was in but one battle. So, yeah, these folks were really active during that time, during the Civil War and whatnot. So these are just the, looks like the quarters right here. And these are the grounds of this mansion right here. This looks like the side. So yeah, so this is of course the mansion where the slave owners and all the, you know, all the higher ups, if you will, lived in. But the slaves, they usually lived out in these smaller quarters, these slave houses. Here's one right here. And check this out. They even have the wooden rocking chairs out here. And the log cabin, built in 1835, was restored and is owned by and operated by the city of Chickamauga, as you can see right here. Huh. I wonder if we can go in here. It's open. Never mind. Looks like it's propped by some. But this is the log cabin built outside of the Gordon Lee mansion, and it too was built by slave labor. And just wanted to chill out, reenact sitting out on the porch here in this deep south, in a wooden rocking chair, no less. Yeah, man, it feels really good to be back out here, guys. Feels really good to be back out here. Check out this tree right here. This is the May Lawrence Green Memorial Garden. And here's a plaque right here to commemorate May Lawrence Green, 1884 to 1967. Shout out to May Lawrence Green. They have a little gazebo out here too. Plenty of shade underneath here. The little wrought iron small chairs. And nicely kept grounds. They even have a chapel back here too. Looks like. So they kept the chapel right here on the grounds. So this looks like potentially, I'm not sure what denomination this church is right here, or what chapel, or what denomination served in this church, in this chapel. Possibly an Episcopal church, I'm not sure. It has this little small gable porch right here. And they have something over there, I'm not sure what that is. But yep, these are the grounds of Gordon Lee Mansion. Underneath this gazebo, guys, is one of the antique wooden barrels. Now, I'm not quite sure what they use this for, aside from potentially getting some water. It has this turning lever right here. So I thought it might have been like a whiskey barrel, but it may be. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what this was used for, but it sits right out here in the rear of the mansion. So yeah, it's one of those antique wooden barrels. And this is the mansion smokehouse right here. And this smokehouse right here was constructed in 1847, used as the same bricks as the house. So whatever bricks were left over, they used to build this smokehouse. And Georgia was primarily a farming society, and most families were scattered all over each county. relying on farm-grown food and livestock to feed their family. Towns were several miles away with no trucks or automobiles or even refrigeration. So in order to keep meat edible for long periods of time, a smokehouse was used. In order to smoke the meats and protect from animals and thieves, this preservation of meat was by heavy salting, sometimes preserving for a year or more. Smoking the meat added flavoring as desired. For example, hickory has a really smoky taste reminiscent of bacon, while maplewood is sweeter and milder. So as the winter approached, the farmers used to have to provide for a big family. So November and December were usually cold months, providing refrigeration. Hogs were put up, fattened on corn, and made ready to kill. And hog killing was a yearly ritual that required very cold weather to keep the meat from spoiling. Yeah, so that is how they, that was their food source right there, the hogs. Now, again, harvesting, was pretty much dead during the winter months, but it was a good way to at least store and keep the meat fresh. And this is an article from the book called The Witness of a House by Francis Arthur Green, DDS. And it was really busy around this place today. That includes everyone on this plantation. You would think that 50 hogs killed in one day would be enough for a whole year around here, but not so. Papa James Lee says that we must have at least a ham a day for a year to feed this crowd. The hog killing will be repeated here twice more than this year before it's all finished. Last year we killed 200 hogs, but Papa says we won't have quite this many this year. Thank goodness, because this is real work. And this is a lot more to take into, but in short, that's what had to be done. They had to they had to kill a lot of hogs in order to provide for the big families and stuff so that they could eat. I know that sounds graphic. This is only for educational purposes. So I'm just putting that out there, educational purposes. But by the way, I'm got to give a shout out to these people too. The blacks take the knuckles and the ears, and sometimes Papa gives them the whole head. And all sorts of good things like pickled pig's feet and ears can be made. So basically the slaves got the scraps. They got the scraps, whatever was left over. And Sally Lee Gaskell, November 1st, 1860 to May 27, 1896. And this sign was provided by Private James Ingram Camp, 1977, son of Confederate veterans. So yeah, that was slavery in a nutshell out here in the deep South. Yeah, and there goes the side porch right there. Yeah, man, you guys, every time you come over here, it just, to read about this story. Again, this is I know it's educational purposes, but it can get emotional reading and learning about stuff. But stuff like this, I feel like this history needs to be preserved so that we can learn about it. So, yeah, Gordon Lee Mansion right here at Chickamauga. Let's continue, shall we? Which brings me to downtown Chickamauga. So this is where a lot of the shops are. They have a lot of mom and pop shops, cafes, boutiques, hair salons, all that good stuff. Record stores, things you would typically find in a small town downtown. They even have a sports card shop right here. Another Canon, of course. Keeping in touch with the Civil War theme right here in Chickamauga. So it's good that they have, despite how old this town is, that they have modern shops and downtown. So when you want to break from the history, You can come to more modernized areas of the town. Women's clothing boutique right there. Y'all got to get over there across the street. Looks really dope. I'm finna get over there in just a minute. Just saw a nice little drop top Beamer pass by. Art gallery. Chickamauga Family Dental. So I'm guessing this is Thomas Avenue. Oh, this is the corner of Gordon. So this is Gordon Street. This main drag right here is Gordon Street, but we're at the corner of Thomas Avenue. So this is the intersection of Thomas Avenue and Gordon Street. And here's information about Major General George H. Thomas. Was born in Southampton County, Virginia, but graduated from West Point in 1840. And so he participated in the Seminole War and the Mexican War. And he also participated in the Battle of Chickamauga, where he commanded the 14th Corps of Chickamauga and became known as the Rock of Chickamauga for his defense of the retreating federal lines at Snodgrass Hill. And after the war, he commanded the Division of the Pacific. So that's him right there. Wow, they even put on there, somebody wrote on there, loser. Wow. Interesting. But here goes the railroads over here. This is like an abandoned building right here. But we're right over here at the rail line. Now, just want to get some history of Chickamauga as far as it pertains to the railroads. Here's a nice little mural right here. The Civil War battle in the valley of the Chickamauga. So it just has an illustration of what took place during the Battle of Chickamauga. Let me go over here to this railroad depot. I was trying to see who that mural was by. Couldn't find any information. But this is the old railroad depot for Chickamauga, which functions as a visitor center and museum. So there's a railroad car right there. So of course the rail lines were very critical during the during the battles. You know, a lot of the supplies were shipped via the railroads for military supplies, but also post-war during an industrial age. You know, it was the railroads were important to basically supplement the industry. Liberty Tavern and Bistro. Southern Shadows. And would you look at here, check this out. You have this alley seating area with a bunch of colorful umbrellas. This is really cool right here. This is really dope. Potential thumbnail right here. This is nice. Whoever came up with this idea, this aesthetic, shouts out to you. It might have been a collective of individuals who came up with this aesthetic, but it's really dope. It's really dope. Then you also have the painting right here on the side of this building. Chickamauga Nanas Patch. LDM. LDM, I think that's what that says. Shout out to LDM. It looks like it was painted April 11, 2025. So they might have did this whole thing just last year. It's really cool. Then you again, you have a lot of shade too. The umbrellas do provide a lot of shade. I forgot to mention that. So it's symbolic of all the shade that's available. Pretty cool. Since it's pretty warm outside, I might go grab some ice cream. Droop Scoops. Got this vanilla milkshake right here at the Droop Scoops restaurant. Droop Scoops Ice Cream Parlor right here on Gordon Street, downtown Chickamauga. And this is the ambiance here. You know, pretty nice little setup here. Nice ambiance here at, again, Droop Scoops. They have ice cream cones, sundaes, banana splits, different forms of ice cream. It's slow today because this is a Thursday, but generally they be more of a crowd on Saturdays because that's when the tourist train comes through. So if you want to come and get some really good ice cream, come to Droop Scoops. Very appetizing and very cool for a hot summer day like today in early June. Yeah, guys, had to do a intermission, an ice cream intermission at that. Now back to it. Outside this building, this is a Masonic temple. It's a very historic building, which now functions as a Elixir hair studio right here in Chickamauga. Yeah, there goes the temple right there. Still out here in Chickamauga. It's more to see over here at the historic Crawfish Springs. As you can see, this sign right here says "Welcome to Crawfish Springs" with the crawfish right here, of course. That's pretty neat. You can stick your head right there and take a picture, selfie, whatever. But yeah, Crawfish Springs, amphitheaters down this way. And it looks like what may be a tower or a smokestack or something along those lines. If this is a smokestack, then that means a foundry must have been somewhere nearby. So over here, it's a nice place to fish. This is the springs right here. It's a few people out there fishing. But here's some historical background of Crawfish Spring. Crawfish Spring was the first name given to the modern community of Chickamauga, Georgia. Cherokees lived in this area before their forced removal in 1838 with their Chickamauga District Courthouse located near the spring. Now in the 1840s, an early white settler, James Gordon, used enslaved African craftsmen to build an imposing two-story brick plantation house west of the spring, located today just across this highway. Now in 1861, James Gordon's son, Clark, stood on a large rock between the spring and the house to raise a company of local men for Confederate service to defend their homeland from federal invasion. And the struggle came to Crawfish Spring in April 16, 1863. On the 16th, Union Major General William S. Rosecrans, commander of the Army of Cumberland. So right here you have back in 1889, veterans gathered at the Crawfish Spring in 1889 to support the establishment of the Chickamauga-Chattanooga National Military Park. Now, the Chickamauga-Chattanooga National Military Park is nearby in Fort Oglethorpe. So, so they have plenty of monuments commemorating the Civil War in the battlegrounds right here in North Georgia, specifically Chickamauga and Fort Oglethorpe. There's an image of Dr. Glover Perrin, who was the medical director during the time where Crawfish Spring established major hospitals, depot for the Battle of Chickamauga to treat, again, soldiers that were wounded. And again, there's a spring right there, as you can see at a distance. So it's a nice place to relax and chill, walk around, walk the dog, fish, all that good stuff. And here's some more historical markers. Now this was historical Camp Thomas. So the country's first national military park was the Chickamauga and Chattanooga Military Park, built in 1895. And this is where a lot of training took place around this area. A lot of training took place, and it was called Historic Camp Thomas. This is where training took place for the soldiers in war. So you had the Civil War that, of course, took place on these grounds. So I told you guys at the beginning, it's going to be a lot of Civil War history, and there's also, you got to keep in mind that the Chickamauga also did the Spanish-American War. They took place. It was a site at the Spanish-American War back during the day. So during that time. So yeah, this is some images of some shops and stores. And there were plenty of infantries. They had an all-black 25th Infantry. So you had this area called Little, and the town of Little, Lytle. I don't know if it's pronounced Lytle or Little, but it might be Lytle. But there was a presence of military troops at the Chickamauga Park during the Spanish-American War, which constituted most activity since there was the Civil War. And a small community called Lytle grew up just outside the camp. So here's some images of Lytle back in the day. And here's some unauthorized shops and stores. And there's the battlefield station in Lytle. So again, there was a black 25th U.S. Infantry who arrived at Chickamauga Park around April 15th, 1898, being the first regiment to arrive at that place. And we were a curiosity. Thousands of people, both white and colored, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, visited us daily. Most of them have never seen a colored soldier. So that was a heck of a shock to see a regiment of mixed soldiers, but that's what it was. And of course, you had the Camp Thomas, which also had hospitals. You had the later hospital, formerly Park Hotel, which was here in Chickamauga. So all of this, by the way, was on this site where I'm standing right now. You had a regimental hospital. So sometimes they had to set up hospitals underneath tents. And here were some patients and nurses who were at the Sternberg Hospital, as you can see here. So for those who might be interested in visiting Chickamauga, they also have information at the Depot Museum, downtown Chickamauga. But yeah, the former Park Hotel at Chickamauga was bought at $10,000 by Miss Mary T. Leader of Chicago and given to the government for the comfort of the boys in Camp Thomas. So, they sold the whole, so it was sold, the whole Park Hotel was sold in order to establish a hospital for the soldiers. That's how brutal that war was. General Joseph Wheeler right here. And the Spanish-American War allowed the South to demonstrate its loyalty and honor under fire. At first, Secretary of War Russell A. Wheeler, who this is right here. Russell A. Alger. So now this is General Joseph Wheeler. So Russell Alger was a different individual. But he was concerned that Southerners would not support the war due to bitterness over losing the Civil War. He then had an absolutely brilliant idea that he would recruit several former Confederate generals to wear the blue uniform among the U.S. Army. Once again, he chose, among others, Thomas L. Rosser, Fitz Lee, and Joe Wheeler. All were commissioned as major generals of volunteers. So the North and South reunited apparently to fight the Spanish-American War. So there's a General Fred Grant right here. Now, he was the son of Ulysses S. Grant, who was the general of the Union Army. So lots of Civil War history right here at Chickamauga. And there's more right here at Crawfish Springs. So Crawfish Springs, once again, a community set up here after the Civil War. Or before the Civil War, I should say, excuse me, before the Civil War even took place, decades before. This is the grounds of the Cherokees. Really nice spring water. Obviously, they use it as a place to go fish and to drink the spring water. Crawfish Springs. This well you see right here, this well is right here on the site of Lee and Gordon Mills. Lee and Gordon's Mill, historic landmark, about 2 miles north of downtown Chickamauga. So this is the grounds of Lee and Gordon's Mills. This is like a looks like a house right here. This is Private John Ingram Camp, Sons of Confederate Veterans. So it's one of those type of homes right there. But this was also a Civil War site. This is Lee and Gordon's Mills. Now, the first general store was established in 1857 of Lee and Gordon's Mills. The original mill was burned down and destroyed in 1863 during the course of the Civil War. But this one was built in 1867 after the war was over with, of course. And there was a sawmill over here as well before. But in its heyday, this Lee and Gordon's Mills produced over 70,000 bushels of milled grain. And that was in 1880. So we're talking late 19th century. It was the first general store. And go over here, you see the American flag right there. And let's see, and right next to this is a building called the Veterans of All Wars Museum. So it's just a bunch of markers of different individuals. Let me go over to the first one. So you have Crittenden's Corps at Lee and Gordon's Mill. So it talks about Lee and Gordon's Mill role in the Civil War. General Thomas Crittenden. So there was a fort that was built over here. As you can see, there was fortified positions, grounds of Lee and Gordon's Mills. So there was advances of Confederate soldiers over here. And that was Lee and Gordon's Mill during wartime. And General Joseph Wheeler, mentioned him earlier. And that was Gordon's Mill. That was what, there was a dam. There was a dam over there. Now I got to go over there because there's actually a creek nearby here as well. And there goes General William T. Sherman of the Union. That's him right there. General James B. McPherson. So they came here on May 6th. You know, they came here from Resaca, Georgia, Dalton, set up a flank. So you had different volunteer regiments who served over here. Bugler William J. Carson, Sergeant Alexander Reed, Captain Clifton Kelly, Captain Horace Porter, Lieutenant Orville Chamberlain, and Lieutenant Anthony Taylor. Now these are all the players. Many of these individuals responded to calls, such as Anthony Taylor. He right here, he responded to President Lincoln's calls for volunteers early in the war and enlisted on August 22nd, 1861 from the 15th Pennsylvania Cavalry. So you had a lot of volunteer soldiers that came and took part in this battle. And Chickamauga is no different. Sergeant William G. Whitney right there, Private George S. Myers, and Corporal William E. Ritchie. You know, so you had so many people from different areas come over here to partake in this war, or this battle, because there were multiple battles. You had the Civil War, which was in its entirety the war, but you had multiple battles as well that took place in the midst of the war. Lee and Gordon's Mill. Now this is a property that's been placed on the National Historic Register of Historic Places. And here's the mill, here's the creek right here. That's the flow. Looks like it was a dam over here as well. But yes, generally when it came to mills and factories and stuff like that, generally those dams provided the power. You know, it was hydroelectric power that would power the mills so that they can produce at their full capacity. First general store established 1857. Okay. Wow. See all those logs right there? Danger, do not go beyond the fence. Of course not. Of course not. I guess I'm assuming those logs help with the flow of the water. Help the water from stacking up too high on this high ground. That's my guess. Helps regulate the flow of the water. But yep, it's right here on the site of Lee and Gordon's Mill, right here in Chickamauga. With that in mind, good people, this concludes this vlog here in the historic southern town, historic Civil War southern town of Chickamauga, Georgia. If you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell. Once you hit that bell, make sure you select all. That way you get notified every time I drop a new vlog. And with that in mind, good people, stay tuned for more content down the pipeline. This is P9 coming at you once again. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next one. Peace.